Hi, Teresa.
Hey.
Oh, thanks for
I feel like you
joining me
look so
today.
vibrant and I'm here in my my sage and
We love sage. Okay. The contrast
spectacles.
is seen. Okay. You've got the red
Okay.
shirt. For those who are listening, you've got a red shirt. You got sage in the background. It's simple. It's designerly nonetheless. But thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you for taking the time to nerd out with me again. So, for those who don't know, Teresa and I guess we started as internet buddies, just posting and being Black people on the internet, on LinkedIn, in design. And then over time,
Yeah.
we were able to connect a lot more. And then I was like, oh, this person is not just an internet ambassador, but is also really thoughtful in a way that I want to feature in the staff designer. And so that's what I ended up doing. We talked about 2 years ago, which is so weird. And I would love
I
to,
know.
it's so strange. But yeah, what have you been up to since
And
then?
I took your class.
Yes, you did do that. You were basically a mentor the whole time, which was awesome. So thanks for being in the class. But yeah, you were such a great participant. But yeah, what have you been up to? What are you working on right now? How has your relationship to staff work changed at all since we last talked?
Still keep on keeping on. Still the current job I had a couple years ago, operating as staff. I think really the big change is I've been through quite a few manager changes. I have one now that's sticking, and that's great because we set a goal. So he joined late last year to get me more out of the day to day and more into that staff role. So because I think when we first talked, I was basically playing double duty all the time. I
Yeah.
was being both design manager and staff designer, and it was just a lot. So now I'm firmly in the camp of staff designer with a manager where I have a really great partnership. And yeah, our big goal for this year is like, how do I spend more of my time in that strategic work, especially around defining quality, which is a big personal thing for me, and try to offload more of that day to day, like basically getting better at delegating and coaching, like my senior designers and just I don't know what word to say. I'm like, like the normal design, but when you're the mid-career, it's like you're not a junior, you're not a senior, you're
Yeah.
just a designer. Like, so
Mid-level,
getting
yeah.
better at, yeah, spreading that work out and getting really clear about what's high value for me to work on versus others.
Congratulations on kind of landing in a place where things, it sounds like, feel a bit more balanced. And
Mm.
the work is now, yes, like how do you, of course, face a lot of these ambiguous challenges and figure out how to support the growth of your teammates at the same time. You
Yeah.
alluded to this a little bit, but you were in the course, you probably remember people ask a lot in the staff designer course about time management. And specifically, one of the most common pains is that people have a calendar that basically has 30 minutes of focus blocks at a time stretched between all these meetings. How do you make that time for that high level altitude of work where you're visioning toward the future?
Yeah. So I think it's great. I talked about having a great manager makes a big difference. And so since we know that's a goal for me, so last year I helped lead an effort with my team. So we have this operating model and basically outlined the operating model and all of its phases, including adding places where there's overlap. And so, since we did the operating model, we made it very clear in that like, the staff designer is responsible for taking the business strategy work and distilling it down into saying, here's the type of feature thing that we need, and then knowing that gets handed off to the senior designer. And so, saying very firmly, the staff designer's remit is to work closely with the PM and to some extent the design manager and sometimes the directors. And that actually has cut down on a lot of things that I don't have to attend because then we slowly started to say, hey, I was like, I'm going to start not being in more of the Scrum team oriented meetings because I'm not as close to delivery. I'll show up if you need me, but that cut out at least 40% of the meetings that I had. And so that was great. And then also, honestly, I block time on my calendar. So from previous jobs running myself ragged, I try my best, I don't always succeed, to always block out lunch for eating, but then sort of like soft things. So like Friday afternoons, I have blocked off as meeting free. Similarly, in the mornings, I just like, take that time on my calendar and I feel empowered to say no. But honestly, the whole operating model thing really changed it because it's like if this isn't a meeting that is explicitly about more strategic work, then Teresa doesn't need to be in it. And then that opened up my calendar a lot. Plus, I can manage up because it's not even like they have to tell me I don't need to be in it. If I'm like, you know what? I actually think this is the remit of my manager. So I'll be like, let me go ahead and manage up and see like you can attend this and then let me know. But that's been the biggest thing of protecting the time is that I think we talked a little bit about this too with roles and responsibilities as well, because I don't know, I'm just so pragmatic and protecting my time, having that focused energy as well as just reminding myself of my roles and responsibilities and doing my best to not step out unless it's needed explicitly. So I think that's been like what's worked. And again, it's always easy to point back to where they're like, why didn't she attend this refinement? And it's, she doesn't do delivery work anymore. And that's where the majority of like designers getting caught in that I've noticed, especially here, is like you're getting caught in those like, oh, we need to talk about the sprint. We need to do this. We need to do this. And we need all designers on deck for everything. And it's like, no, that's not. Our levels in work are just as complex. And you want different people for different things. That's the best way I found to protect it.
That makes sense. So essentially, what I'm hearing you say is that you alluded to this earlier. You have a couple people that you are leading on the team as a designer who's above the ground. You're like in the trees, and
Yeah.
you've got people who are closer to the ground working on the more hands-on day-to-day lower altitude tasks. So those people can maybe participate in the backlog grooming and like all that stuff because they're mostly handling those kinds of tasks. And then you can focus on the strategic work, looking at what's next, like making sure that the roadmap is filled out and makes sense,
Yeah.
for what you're trying to do as a team and as an organization. That's helpful. How hard was it to get that set up? Because sometimes I talk with other designers who are like, I would love to be in a situation like that, but my manager doesn't think there's enough work for that or thinks that I'm still just a hands-on designer. And I've
Yeah.
tried myself. I've said, hey, this is a really expensive use of a staff designer to have
I
me,
say that a lot.
doing these kinds of tasks. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm curious from your perspective, how was that process of getting into that situation?
Easy with my manager because he also agreed. More challenging as we started to communicate it out, that it was like, hey, POs. I think again, this is where we come back to the org chart is okay, if we just look at it objectively, like staff sits at the level of manager and manager sits at the level of director. And so how we always talked about it is like the manager influences up, the staff designer influences down. So that puts the staff in the remit of the project, the sorry, product manager. So when we were getting requests from like POs and things to show up, it was much easier to point back to that and say, hey, we know that she's been doing this before and that you have a really great working relationship with her. And also, like, what Theresa is being held accountable for is this higher level work. And so, even if there's not like a ton of it, I think it's the transition to communicating it to others was hard because people liked working with me. When you're a staff, you produce a high quality of work. So they're expecting that. I think as well, the idea that oh, there's not enough of it. It's okay if there's not enough of it. It's leaning in and just being like, there might not be enough of it. I'm not saying that 100% of my time needs to be dedicated to strategic visioning, but I think starting in the increments of like, okay, you say there's not enough. What if we just start off with 30% of my time? So I have a couple days a week where I'm working on this larger initiative. For me, and this might not work with others, I'm a big pro. I just pitch my own projects. Like I'm in actually in the process. I did that the other day with my manager, and then we had a prioritization conversation across here's all the work that our team's asked to do. I need you to do this one because it's a higher priority, which actually fits into one of my personal goals. And then the strategic visioning work is a little lower, but it's just because we talked about it. And so it's documented that it is a priority, but it's just like, hey, nail this down first and then we'll move here. So I think it's just, I don't know. That's my vibe. I don't know if that's good advice for
Yeah.
people. I'm like, here's this and here's why it's worthwhile. And if they say no, okay, that's the most, there's nothing you can do, but at least you've articulated it, it's documented, and then it blows up for their face for not listening to you. You can just be like, I always think of Captain Holt in Brooklyn Nine-Nine when Terry's wife is pregnant
Oh,
and Jake asks for help. And he's like, I don't know why you're asking me. You made it. He's like, I'm not involved. You made that
yeah,
very clear. And it
that's
was
a
like,
different party. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my,
something when
well,
my manager brings up a problem 3 months that I brought up 6 months ago. Anyway,
it's helpful to hear you say this because, yeah, in the book you did mention, and or I quoted you in chapter 5, and you had said at the time you were spending about 20 to 30% of your time on envisioning the future, and that the way you pitched it was that you needed visioning work in order to be successful because
yeah.
you can't deliver high quality designs if you don't understand how everything ladders up to something bigger. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense that if you're having the conversation in that way, then ideally leadership would understand, like, okay, cool, we get why this is important right now. There's probably other symptoms at play, like, oh, the team is just following what they're told, or they're getting all these customer support tickets and don't know how to prioritize them, things of that
Yeah.
nature. You can see when strategic work is necessary because you can feel it when it's missing.
And that's my job. So part of it, and like what, as we've brought newer designers onto the team, because there's also this misconception of what is the staff role. And it's like it's my job to hold on to all of that together and help
Mhm.
distill it down to how it impacts the day to day. I have to see the forest through the trees. And I'm like, I think people too misconstrue that visioning work is, we all know from maybe being former consultants, myself one as a recovering consultant, that it's like, oh, you're going to spend 3 months just surviving and then it's never going to be tactical. And it's like, no, but vision work is just saying we all need something to latch onto of what we're building towards.
Yep.
Otherwise, we just have quick wins in a trench coat.
Yeah,
Like that's, it's
that's
just like
real.
that stacked up. And
That's so
so,
real.
and it's all of these quick wins are laddering up to something, but if we don't know what they're laddering up to, we're just going to continue to build new. Because I think too, you might get some success talking about strategic work if it's more around not something net new, but saying, hey, we need to take some time to really think about how we're going to grow this offering or grow this experience. Because what I've noticed, honestly, almost everywhere I've worked, especially in as an in-house designer, is we tend to focus on net new and never tend to what's out there. And it's if we start looking at the metrics and we see this, wow, if this is really giving us, is starting to hint at what we need, why don't we invest more time in it? Why don't we understand where it could go instead of being at the whim of, again, quick wins? We don't have to band-aid it all the time,
Yeah.
but it's a hard sell all the time. And I think it's just the nature of the game.
Yeah, you won't always win, like you said. Like sometimes there
Yeah.
will be times where you suggest something and then leadership is like, "Nah, we don't need it." And then
Yeah.
later they're like, we needed it. What happened? And here's the documentation of when we had the discussion and you said no, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I've certainly worked on visions over the years where I could see how easily it could turn into a cutesy artifact that we make and it immediately explodes right after we finish it. Like
Yeah.
not useful. But yeah, I think it's about how you go about implementing it and how you share it afterward and all of that, which I talk about that a ton also in the book, just like making sure that it's not a useless artifact because that is really easy. I am curious what that transition process tends to be like for you. If you feel comfortable talking about it, going from we made this thing, it's our new North Star to okay, now we have to build something.
Yeah. So typically, so at least where I'm at right now, because it depends on the flavor of where your organization is. When I think about doing some visioning work, which I'm like, honestly, I feel like I'm in the midst of all three of them right now. It's more about we have this collection of things. Here's how these collection of things can come together. And sometimes it's a tangible piece or an artifact, but I am also very of the mind that a mock-up is outdated the moment you save it in Figma, right? And I think that too is trying to get people comfortable with visioning work. If we build something that's 5 years out, we're not saying it's going to be this exact thing. So we take it and it's like, all right, let's break this into the parts and pieces that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And then once we break it down as, oh, we need our data to be this way, we need this experience to do this, we need to connect this and this. That gives us kind of our epics and initiatives that go, okay, now if we know that this is our ultimate and this is what needs to be true, because that's what I focus on. It's less the shiny artifact and saying in order to get to something of this nature, what needs to be true in order for that to happen. And once we have those, we honestly start breaking it down. Okay, what do we have in flight right now that's actually chipping away at this? Do we have things in flight that are working against this? And just
Mhm.
asking those questions. Because again, I don't control the backlog, I don't control product and tech, but by facilitating that from a visioning perspective, it starts to get us to think a little bit more, okay, these things should drop off in priority because they're not actually one, meeting the OKRs that we've set, and two, they're not laddering up to where it is we want to go as a team, like the big strategic bet we want to take. And usually that works. Sometimes it's mixed success because then you'll get like an executive who's like, you got to do this one thing, and then you get derailed, but it at least gives us something to go back to. So even if we don't, like right now, one of the visioning things I'm working for, we're slowly chipping away at it, but I do feel like proud because sort of, what is it, little diagram I made of like, hey, our data should be structured like this, and we should think about creating this. We do revisit it regularly. So
Hmm.
then they go back and it's like, oh, wait, we already talked about this, right? And then they go, okay, here's what we need to start chipping away at that. So I'm a big fan too of the horizon mapping as well. So this is ultimately what we want. What do we have in flight now that's getting there? What's the gap and what needs to be true? And then just start breaking it down as what do we have to do in like small steps and knowing like reminding people that those are small steps. So right now, one of the things we're working on is about making a more integrated experience.
Hmm.
And the first version of this involves us basically shipping our org chart, and we keep getting all this feedback that's like, we don't want to ship the org chart. And we're like, no, we strategically made a choice to do that because we're trying to get all the tech in place first. And then we're also trying to test this hypothesis. So one thing that's been really great is since talking to you 2 years ago, one of the big things we've implemented is you cannot design or release or work on anything without a hypothesis. So what is your hypothesis even if this? So even our first version of this is we're just like, our hypothesis is if people have one space where they can see everything they need to do, they're going to move through the funnel faster. That's it. Base level, super small, solvable. These are the metrics we're going to do. And once that hypothesis is out there, we're testing it, we can start going on the next one. And I think that also really helps because it makes I think what I've noticed is with the comment of, oh, we're shipping our org chart, this isn't big and beautiful and a big thing, that's fine. But now with a hypothesis, you're seeing how it's starting to ladder up into the longer term work. So everything starts to feel more meaningful. Like, oh, I'm not just building this weird, crappy dashboard. This first version is helping us learn this so that we can do this in the next step. And I think it's just trying to walk people more and more through that process so they see their work through the lens of, no, you're helping us make this vision come to life. We don't always have to take huge bets. I don't know. My time at
Yeah.
Gravity Tank, we talked a lot about the different types of innovation. And one of them, and a lot of legacy organizations, is incremental innovation, which maybe came from Dublin, but the idea of you don't always have to be 0 to 1 in your innovation. And in most places and organizations like where I work, mostly 100-year-old companies, you're not going to have that. But there are incremental changes that you can make that are equally as innovative, even if they're not as big and shiny as Google coming out with a folding phone. And so it's understanding that impact. I don't know, that's what keeps me going.
A lot of what you've shared resonates with me. So when I worked at Etsy, for example, we weren't big on hypothesis driven design, and then we were suddenly, and it was actually awesome. Honestly, we used a phrase, I think it was like, because the research tells us this thing, we believe that this particular thing will result in this thing. And just doing a small change like that, I think had a profound effect on how people viewed the work. And I think there can be sometimes downsides to incrementing into if you don't know where you're going, which is why it's important to have a vision of some kind so that you actually can, in these larger companies, be a bit more experimental and incremental while still moving somewhere that is ultimately more radical, I suppose you could say. So I think it's awesome that you've brought that perspective and that there's been that shift to make sure that people are being really considerate in terms of what are we trying to do here? What are we trying to learn? And
Yeah.
to have it be more of a learning mindset.
And ultimately, with what you're saying, really hits on yes, you can be incremental, and also having a vision piece, especially when it's tied to timing, can show you when we actually just need to take a big risk. And I think that's sometimes like why with the quick wins in a trench coat is because it's like there's not a lot of risk there. And like, especially me working in financial services, we're very risk averse. But it's like sometimes you're just going to have to do it because if we keep doing incrementally, this gets further and further away. Especially, we've really changed in the last 6 to 9 months trying to make sure we start every project with a competitive audit. So then it even is that of, okay, what is incremental to you, what is a big leap to you is now table stakes for the industry. So you're gonna just have to swallow it and focus on getting this feature or this tech or this thing the way that we need it because this is what our clients are expecting now. This is not, and that was like something I struggled with. Oh my gosh, especially when I was at a different financial institution. Like, yes, there are specific different things, but also from a like ease of use, people in B2B are comparing it to the consumer software that they use. So it can still be complicated and made for experts, but there's this whole notion of they have to use it. And it's like they don't though. They could find a free version of this and then you're SOL.
Yeah.
No, we're just going to have to take this gamble. So we have to take this risk. We have to do it because this is what they're expecting now based on not only other business software they use, but similar consumer ones they probably are as well.
It's so important to make sure that when you're working within a company that you are constantly having a conversation that is within the context of the broader industry and recognizing when indirect and direct competition is changing the expectations of your customers. And I think, yes, at a lot of larger institutions, especially ones that are a century old, there is this feeling that the clientele is almost guaranteed, and that's not the case. It's a certain amount of friction that people don't want to have to handle. If
Yes.
it's annoying, they'll deal with it. But then if it's too high friction and it's getting really painful, then obviously they're going to say, okay, this is actually worth me investing in
Yep.
a habit change and I'm willing to do it. And I guess sometimes companies play with just getting up to that line and then backing away. But I think, yeah, part of our job as designers is to constantly remind people expectations are changing around us. We are not dictating what is possible for our customer base. The world is doing
Yes.
that around us, and we're part of the conversation, of course, but nothing is guaranteed.
Yeah, especially digitally. I'm like, the internet's been around for a while, guys. So sometimes I've been at places where we do research of like, oh, how should we do this cancel modal? And I'm like, babe, that was solved 20 years ago. Like when we talk about protecting time, that's one of my big things is stop reinventing the wheel. My dream, I made this little two by two. I actually think I sent it to you of
Yeah.
knowns versus unknowns, like low complexity to high complexity. And I'm like, if we have a lot of knowns and it's low complexity, I never want us to touch this. Engineering, we have a design system, boom, take it. That protects the time because a lot of our time gets sucked in these super low value. Hey, can you design every permutation of your input error states? And I'm like, okay, but are they different than the last input errors that we did? No. Can you just copy those? You don't need a mock-up for that. Like all of those tiny little death by a thousand paper cuts is what I want to start offloading to the systems that we have in place. I'm really excited because we are closer now than we definitely were 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I feel like people were looking at me like I had five eyes or something, and they're like, "What do you mean?" And it's also helpful, not just my manager, but the larger boss over my team is very pragmatic because he's like, design should not be involved in everything. We physically can't because we are less staffed, but it also doesn't make sense. There's just stuff that again, if it's a known, like a contact form, we don't need to research and do discovery on how people feel about contact forms. No, copy what's out there, move on with your day. And
We're
that's,
aware. Yeah.
yeah, that's been the big push is when I joined 2 years ago, everybody was treating every problem as if it was like greenfield blue sky. And I'm like, no, no, this has been solved. Just like make
Basic
this a data,
stuff.
yes, make this a data table, add some actions, bingo, bango. I don't know why you spent a year on this, but we finished it up in 2 weeks. Awesome. Let's just move on.
Wow. I love people. They're so silly. But I get it. It's
Yeah.
like, I think, I don't know what it is per se fully, but I think that sometimes people get into the habit or they get really connected to the feeling of making something new, and they don't recognize that you don't have to do that all of the time, that there are moments where whatever is industry standard is actually totally fine. And I think to your point, it's about prioritizing and figuring out what do we need to do that is special in this
Mm-hmm.
moment and new, and how can we lead the industry versus be at the standard, and then when do we not need to invest that energy. I am curious. It's clear that there's a lot of alignment, it sounds like, between you and leadership, and maybe sometimes you lean on leadership, and just in general you have a strong perspective about why you need to work the way that you work. How do you make sure that other roles are also bought in, and like when do you flag for help?
I am constantly in contact with my PMs. Literally yesterday, all my conversations were like, okay, we've had a bunch of things going on. What are your priorities? Took those priorities, brought them to my manager, and was like, here's everything that they're both saying that they need. Let's start documenting this. I rarely work in a silo. So even that of bringing in other sort of parts of our triad is it's built into our process. When I talked about our operating model, within it, we have a definition of ready and definition of done. And part of that definition of ready is, hey, I can't do my job product until we've had a conversation. And so it's built in of like, I'm not just going to go off of vibes like product, engineering, leadership. Let's talk first. And then I think the documentation has helped with bringing it in because then I'll write a brief, like a specific design brief. I'll throw it back over to them. And again, it's just like a constant sort of collaboration. And even as I'm going through it, again, I have weekly meetings with my product managers and engineering managers where we're talking about the big priorities. I think as well, when I need to bring someone in, is it points back to that, which is like, hey, they're expecting me to take on this strategic work. I don't even know what the requirements are, even from the business strategy perspective. I've asked, I'm not getting them. And then that's typically when I can pull, like when I need to lean on my manager, I'm like, hey, can you help me out here? But for the most part, I feel like I'm never not honestly constantly in contact with them. So when I get feedback that they feel like that, either from like myself or other designers on my team, I'm always like, okay, let's take a beat and see, is that true? Because we have done a lot of work, honestly, to get way more transparent than we were 2 years ago. So constantly having weekly meetings at all different levels. We, for the most part, give access to files. They're seeing the work consistently. We're communicating our timeline. And again, it's a two-way conversation. That's the thing as well is helping our collaborative partners understand that. A lot of them have never worked with designers before, or the ones they were very like, you can't tell me what to do. And we're trying to be like, no, like this is collaborative. We need requirements. It isn't just us being like, here's the most beautiful thing we can build. It's like, tell us what you need and what time, and that's what we'll solve. We're all building this together. It's been a bit of my proudest. I've been in my career this past probably about year or so
Wow.
when we have this monthly meeting called monthly product review, and straight up the engineering managers and tech leads are like calling out designers in it, and that never happened before. They're like, oh my God, thank you so much for the designer on our team. You did such great work. We had such a great collaboration. And then vice versa. It was just like basically the company witnessing this little love fest. And I was like, yes, this is what we've been wanting, which is not just complimenting, not being like, oh, great work, but saying, wow, the way that we worked really changed things. And because of that, we've tried really hard to just have tight-knit collaboration. But then also, again, with the roles and responsibilities, like I'm not going to tell you how to engineer something. You're not going to tell me how to design something. So we also have that healthy level of respect.
That's beautiful. And it's helpful to hear about how long it took to actually make these kinds of changes because the other thing that I hear a lot in the context of the staff designer course is, oh, how long is this kind of behavior change and these habits, how long does it take to make an impact on this kind of behavior? And I always tell people it's going to take longer than you think.
It's a marathon, not
And
a sprint.
it's a marathon, and it sounds like there were some frustrating times, I imagine, but the payoff is eventual, and it's clear that you've reached a place where people, it sounds like, trust each other more and appreciate the work that's happening across the team. And it's wonderful that you've gotten to this place. I did notice that you mentioned, hey, PM, I'm blocked because I don't have the business requirements. I'm assuming specifically business requirements. I've worked at some places where design kind of steps in for PM, for example.
Yep.
And this is another complaint or question that I get a lot. I'm so curious, how do you make sure that the right parties are held accountable? It sounds like one part of it is just having a system where you can say this is when design's ready or whatever the case may be. But are there other things that you're doing to make sure essentially that it's always known who should be making like a business decision, for example?
Probably me being loudly about it in meetings or even the documenting. We'll do open questions and who's responsible. No, it's so funny because we just had an on-site with our sister design team because I'm on the client side, we have an advisor side, and there this came up a lot in conversation. And so I'll point back to leaning on the org chart, leaning on our operating model, but I also think it starts with designers. So one of the great things about I think most high-level designers and people who are really great at their craft and career is they want to be helpful. So your instinct is to lean in, but then you burn out and then there's just frustration. And so I think the biggest thing for who's known accountable is documentation. I can get very litigious if I want to, but like in the previous organizations, what I had observed over like my 3 years being there, a total of five, was that, hey, when you give us a requirement, it takes us to get 2 weeks to get to a design. So then we started using that as our metric. So it was like, okay, our open question is we don't understand these business needs or these requirements. Can you help get them to us? But every time you get us a new requirement, you change a requirement, it's going to add 2 weeks onto the cycle. Like it'll take us a sprint to get through it. And that was another mechanism because by just documenting week after week, that we weren't getting what we needed from the PO. And not in a way that's like, oh, you're not giving us what we need, but more of a like, hey, this is what we've agreed upon as our working agreement. And I think number one, if you don't have a documentation of even the roles and responsibilities or a product ops model, I think just having a working agreement is the one way to do it because you're telling people you are signing up for this accountability. Like this is the expectation. And then that gives you something to point back to. You're not going to be popular, but if it protects your time, but also having that documentation, then when you do step out of the role, it's okay because you're all are consciously aware of, okay, we, like me as a designer, I'm going to take on helping facilitate creating business requirements or even starting some because things are getting held up. I want to be helpful, so I'm going to be helpful. And just acknowledging that from everybody involved. A friend and I gave a talk at the Design Ops Summit about DEI, and the title of our talk was How Changing Hearts and Minds Doesn't Work for DEI Initiatives, but Checklists Do. And that's very much my vibe in design. As unsexy it is, documentation, checklists, working agreements. I was just saying that today for a lot of the challenges at our organization is leaning into the roles and responsibilities that are our job family framework, leaning into the ops model will solve 90% of your problems. And it's not being uncollaborative, because I like to say being a good collaborator is not being a doormat. It is just saying, here is what I am being held accountable for. I'm going to do my best to perform my job function, so I need you to do your best to do yours as well. We're all, at the risk of sounding like High School Musical, we're all
I
in this
literally was
together.
thinking it. I was like, is this gonna be it? Are we doing
Yes,
it? Are we
I
all in this
mean,
together?
we are all in this together. And I think even when some of the tension, because I've been on several programs where it has been like oil and water butting heads between product engineering and design, and just starting off with, okay, for this working agreement, we all want the same thing. We all want to do the best that we can for our clients and users. So with that framing, let's, again, I'm also intention doesn't negate impact, but think of it from that lens. Give it a generous interpretation that I'm just trying to do my job the best that I can. And I know you're doing the job the best that you can. Let's treat it with the same kind of respect. And I think that gets mixed results on that, we'll say. But that makes me think a little about what you were just talking of how long it takes. Is the marathon not a sprint for these behaviors? And also, unpopular opinion, sometimes design, you got to look at yourself because we were the problem
I agree.
in some of the instances. And I think sometimes there is this notion of like design can do no wrong and it's product and tech that's the issue. And it's sure they might be, but I remember a couple of designers that were having a really challenging time. I asked them that. I'm like, what self-reflection have you done? What are the ways in which you have not shown up as a great partner and been responsive? And when they didn't have an answer, I'm like, yeah, so start there.
Go to the
Because
drawing board.
I'm observing ways in which you've not shown up as a good partner. It can't be designed against everybody. It's everybody trying to do the best they can. And it
Yes.
is also you taking accountability and responsibility, which has also been a big shift in the past couple of years. We just had I'll say a dust up and a miscommunication that was, we'll say lots of people's fault, but on the design side, my manager and I were like, you know what? We own that. We didn't communicate clearly. We said the word exploration and that person interpreted differently, and that's okay. So we're owning up to the reason that this got all muddled here is because we weren't clear. So we're going to own that. We weren't clear about timeline. We rectified that situation. We're sorry that it caused this. And it just was as simple as that. Is okay, we reflected on our behavior. We're not just going to blame product and tech for what's going on. It's because I'm being held accountable for framing up the project and I didn't do a good job. So I'm sorry. I assumed that the person knew what I meant. They
Yeah.
didn't. And I'm also at a place where it's safe enough to do that because I can understand a lot of people maybe don't. Where I'm at in my career with all that stuff is, well, I was looking for a job when I found this one. So it's just like, okay, you're gonna fire me for admitting I did something wrong. Great.
Ideally not, right? You
Yeah.
learn, you reflect, you get better. And I really do appreciate what you're calling out here, underscoring both communication, like proactive communication and expectation setting, including documenting how you intend to work together. I think that every time that I've done that, it has been so
Mm-hmm.
beneficial because you usually find, like you're saying in the case where you didn't do that, there's probably something that you think is the case that somebody else reads the word and
Mm-hmm.
they interpret it completely differently. Or if you just say it and you don't write it down and define these things, then people just carry their own idea of what the work is going to be. I always like to do what I think I saw in a book once that was called like coming to terms. You are agreeing like what is the work that we're going to do? How are we going to do it? How long are we expecting that will take? Who's going to be accountable for what? Who's the driver? Who's not? Those kinds of things are really critical for me to do the best kind of work that I possibly can. And then, yeah, the thing for me is that I have to hold to those boundaries.
The
It's
hardest part.
really uncomfortable. It's so painful sometimes to watch and know that I could step in and save people from themselves, but I've learned over time, you can do your best, you can flag certain things, but ultimately people need to do what they need to do and they need to learn how they need to learn, and you can't
Hmm.
save them from that.
And that is actually the biggest thing that I'm struggling with in this staff role. And actually, I got some feedback last year from one of my senior designers around Theresa could delegate more. And I took that personal reflection and I'm like, by me jumping in, it's also communicating that I don't trust them. And that's not true. I do trust them. I'm coming at it from the perspective of I don't want to bother them. I can just go ahead and do this, but they are interpreting it as I don't know why she doesn't think that we can't come and help. She should ask for more help. And I'm like, I don't want that because that's a confidence killer. If your superior is like, oh, I'll just do everything myself. And so that's one of the big things that I've been really trying to do. And also I got really into Killing Eve, which I had never watched
Oh,
before.
nice.
And like when Dasha tells Villanelle, where she's like, that's what
Oh,
management is, watching somebody do something you could worse than you. And I was like, yeah, if you're seeing any of this, my designers, you are not worse than me. You are different than me, and it's not wrong. And going back to my own principles of, okay, it's solving the business need. I wouldn't have done it this way, but this is also another valid way. And that has been the uncomfortability of as you move up, it's fine. They can interpret it this way. And as long as it meets the business requirements, which again, trying to go back to that objectivity, that's fine. But it's
absolutely.
hard. It's so
It's
hard
so
because you're just like,
uncomfortable.
I could, you don't
Yeah.
need 6 months to do this. You just, but it's like, whatever. Okay, fine. You got
Literally,
to
yeah.
learn
It's
how
like
you
it's
learn.
right
Yeah.
there. And no,
Yeah.
they've got to do this one.
Yeah.
I need to focus elsewhere. And that's the thing, you're taking
Yeah.
that time back to use it for other more valuable things. For example, how the heck do we prompt and all these kinds of new tools that are coming out, like all the things?
Why
Like
did you have to bring up AI?
the worst. I know. I have to be that person.
How are
Really
we
getting
prompting? Teresa's not prompting. Teresa, she's prompting, but it's like, what would it look like if we made a Tamagotchi financial app?
that sounds adorable. And I want everybody to be as zany with their prompts as you are being. But I do have to ask because, it is
I
the
know. It's
thing
the
that
time.
everybody's talking about now. Like, how are you thinking about this and incorporating AI into your work? Like, how do you use it? How are you helping other people potentially to figure out how to incorporate it into their work, if at all?
I'm not.
Sick.
Personally, like every company, we have a mandate to think about it. And so we've been trying to. So philosophically, how I would incorporate it is that some of those lower surface level tasks that are like, I never want to have to design an input. We have the same errors, whatever like that. If dev needs a mock-up, we should be able to prompt Figma make to do this. And it's like honestly, it's like that last 2%. My challenge with it is that I have noticed all of these new tools are becoming the designer and not the designer. And I'm not even being with those people who comments like, I don't hate AI. I'm like, I'm a Luddite, which look them up, okay? It wasn't that they didn't know technologies, that they actively were like bashing printing presses. That's me. I will be very nice to you, machine learning, because when the robot uprising happens, I want you to be like, at least she was polite before you like murder me.
Correct. I say please and thank you
Yes.
to
Yes,
my
please, thank you so
robot
much.
friend, my
Yes.
robot assistant.
But it's more like when we think about this, how is it enhancing the things that we already know? Right. So it's like what I'm noticing with the tools becoming the designers and people wanting to incorporate it into their work, I find myself philosophically asking, like, then what's your job? Because people have talked about using it to interpret research insights and grab themes. People have used it to be like, oh, let's use it on high level concepts for business strategy. And sure, you can do that, but then at what point it's like they're offloading the stuff that I feel you need that human interpretation to. And then they're like, well, yeah, no, then we can focus on making really beautiful UI. And I'm like, then what is our job? There's just this rush to incorporate it, especially I think we talked about as it looked at more portfolios of newer designers, right? Some of those foundations are missing, and that's what's showing up. But because it's being programmed into AI, it's, oh, this is good. And it's sure it's shiny, but it's empty. I'm not helping people use new tools, so if I ever have to look for a new job, please don't hold it against me. But know that your team's going to have really great foundations and fundamentals because I think you can't understand how to incorporate the tools if you're not trying to, if you don't know what the tool's trying to do. I have a brother who's a developer, and he and I talk about this all the time. Of the reason that I feel successful in my AI usage is because I know what it's trying to do. And then I know when it messes up. But if you don't know what it's trying to do, you're never going to make the assumption that it messes up. I remember once I decided I like to use it in little experiments when asked. A team in my organization did like a group, like all designers come jam on coming up with. So we were an advisor-based organization, and if an advisor doesn't have a photo, they're like, instead of making it just a logo, we can make it a fun brand moment. And so one of the ideas that I pitched was based off of the MIT logo from what, 2011. That was like it auto-generated something. So I used
Cool.
Figma Make, and I was like, okay, we're gonna take this pattern, we're gonna turn it into a base unit, and then that base unit will auto-generate different configurations. So it still feels cohesive, but everybody's like thing is like a little. And so I use Figma Make to create that piece of software just to see how much prompting it took. My God, I was like, I could have retaught myself jQuery in the time to do this that it took for me for Figma Make. So then at what point are we actually saving time? And again, we have that on-site and somebody was talking about, oh, we have somebody who's coming and writing all the prompting language so we can put in this part of the design system. And I'm like, but why? Like, why? What
What is
problem
the
is it
long-term
solving?
benefit?
Yeah,
What is the
they're
point?
spending all this time prompting and tokens usage, killing the rainforest, whatever your vibe is. But that's what it comes back to. Why? What are we trying to use it to solve? Because it can't solve anything. But there are very specific things. So if we think about it, I I'm gonna quote, I believe it was Stephanie Lawrence who was in the staff class with
Yeah,
me. We
yeah,
recently
yeah.
connected. She talks a lot about that as like how do we use it for like automation but not replacement. So yeah, when we started brainstorming how we could use it in our design workflow, my thought was, what is the stuff that we don't want to do that's low value? That's what we automate. And we can start to figure out how we have AI do some of that.
For real. Yeah, I think that's pretty much where I'm also landing. I never want to think about an error state if there's,
Yeah.
a way
Oh
to
my
just
God.
have that be automated. And sometimes I will use it as another way to poke holes in some of my thinking. But like ideally, I actually go have conversations with people. It's really one of those things where it's like anything that's like relatively mundane. I'll consider it. And again, it'll be maybe like a little assistant, but I would also totally just rather have an intern or a couple junior designers or something like that so that they actually learn and I'm benefiting the future of humanity, which
Yeah.
seems important. But yeah, thank you for sharing your thoughts on it. I am curious as we get closer to closing out, what's keeping you in design right
Ugh,
now?
tactically a paycheck. I'm a very practical designer. We can maybe talk at length another time how I almost dropped out of design school because I didn't think I was designerly enough to attend design school. But that's what's keeping me. I love solving problems. I am a scientist at heart. And it's also just like, it's less about what keeps me in design and more in my current position as well, as I have a really great team. Even the days where I'm like, what am I even doing? This made up role for made up pieces of paper. I get to work with some really great people. And I do get to have little moments of the reason I'm even in it is I like just making people's lives easier. Even if it's as small as, wow, I moved that button and now that person who works for a rich person like we all do isn't going to get fired because it's not taking them so long to export stuff. Great. It's like
Meaningful.
one small thing. And then plus I use my time to use my creativity elsewhere.
I do think for me, this type of design, product design, is like a great ratio of like creativity, pay, time, use, ideally,
Ideally.
I do need to eat and pay my bills. So, ideally getting to do that while being creative and solving problems and doing something helpful for people is great. And sometimes I do think, wow, it's pretty wacky that we get paid so much to move rectangles. And you know what? I'm cool with that. I'm grateful
What do you
for,
mean? We're paying to solve the world's foremost issues that may be involved in a rectangle.
oh yeah, wicked problems
I
being
think,
solved by rectangles.
yeah, I think too, because that's what everybody's talking about. Guy's going to replace me. And it's like, I don't worry about my job as a designer because I am confident in what my value is. And let me tell you, my value isn't knowing how to use Figma. And if I work at an organization that doesn't see that, then I need to find another organization that does. And it's
Facts.
also I don't know, the more pragmatic we get about design as a career path, like if you are, I don't know, in school and listening to this, it's great that you're getting filled with all those ideals. But let me tell you, when they come crashing down, it'll be hard because it happened to me, it happens to all of us. And like
Everyone.
it's okay. It's okay. It's what you can live with.
What advice would you have for someone who is new to the staff design position?
When I got this role, I had no idea. That's why I took the class. And I think in general, defining it for yourself. So we get new staff designers all the time, and they're like, how do you act as a staff designer here? And I always bring up your course, and I'm just like, you see what the team needs and then operate there. So my advice of coming into the role is just learn and help define it and co-create it with what's around you. Be selfish in what it is you want to do. So like when I do the stuff that's outside of my like roles and responsibility, or if I'm like too far into delivery, again, I am safe enough to do this. I straight up tell my manager like, okay, let's revisit my goals for the year because I'm doing some stuff I don't want to be doing. So let's remix. I know sometimes I got to be a pinch hitter, but like now that we're more filled out, I don't think I need to be anymore. So I think it's just learn to find it yourself and realize there is no one way to be it. Yeah.
That's
Mm,
beautiful. Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Theresa. It was so good to
sure.
chat with you. Where can people
Ditto.
find you on the internet?
Oh my God. Mainly now just on LinkedIn. I got rid of all social media.
That's a vibe.
So I keep thinking about this thing I saw that was like tech enthusiasts versus engineers. And they're like tech enthusiasts are like, oh, my whole home is whatever, whatever. And it's like a real engineers. I have one device that's 20 years old and I keep a gun in my desk drawer in case it comes to life. And I was like, yeah, that's me now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, it's me, LinkedIn, and sometimes I remember I have a Blue Sky account. So I feel you on that. But
Yeah,
yes,
like
I
I'm on
appreciate
Facebook,
you.
but
Yeah, you're on Facebook.
because I moved to a town, like I moved to a place
Ah,
where I joined buy nothing groups and then look at Facebook
smart.
Marketplace, but I literally post nothing. So my account
Buy
is not
nothing,
fake,
post
but
nothing.
yeah, buy nothing, post nothing. New
Living for that.
motto.
Amazing. Again, Teresa, you were such a fun person to get to yap with. And so thanks for coming on today.
For
And
sure. Thanks for
thanks
having
to
me.
all listening and watching. And there will be more very
Yeah.
soon.